Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time I'm speaking with Benjamin Field, who is a pioneer in artificial intelligence and deep fake, although, yeah, it's one of those words, isn't it, that's can sometimes be mistaken or people get the wrong end of the stick, I think. And he's also one of the producers and a director of a show that is very much in the zeitgeist at the moment and has been all over the media, Virtually Parkinson. I'm speaking with Benjamin Field. Hey, Ben, thanks for speaking today.
Well, thank you very much. Hi, lovely to be here.
Thank you. So, what's your own history in podcasting?
My own history in podcasting? Actually, I don't have one. So I'd never made a podcast before this. Not really. I featured on one a little while ago with an influencer who lives nearby, and we did some of that together. But I have no production experience in podcasting. My background is predominantly traditional TV and film.
Okay, your history is in TV and film. So how did that go then to this work that's being done at the moment with AI? Were you involved with, for instance, we both know Jamie Anderson. So has it got anything in to do with, or is it inspired by the work that was done with Jamie? Because I know that there was some work done with Jerry, his father's voice, for the documentary that came out about him. Is there anything to do with that that's brought this work on?
Yeah, so I mean, I first came across Jamie Anderson whilst we shared a rather disappointing curry in Cannes at a TV market many moons ago, and then I approached him about making a documentary about his father, a biographical documentary called Jerry Anderson: A Life Uncharted, for which Jamie offered me around about 36 hours of audio archive of Jerry talking about his life. And we as a documentary to ITV, BritBox. And ultimately what happened is that the first round of feedback came in and said, actually, the audio archive is great, but there are no visuals attached to that. So how are you going to present this? And we thought about it for a while, and that was, let's imagine that the deepfake Tom Cruise came out on TikTok on the Monday, and we were having this conversation on the Tuesday. So I rang Jamie and said, how do you fancy resurrecting your dead dad? And that conversation could have gone two ways, but Jamie, being very gracious, lent into it and said, yeah, actually, that sounds really interesting. So we created a deepfake of Jerry. So that would be providing the visuals only to accompany the pre-existing audio. So at no point did we create any audio for that. All of the audio was pre-existing and was authentic, and we were creating the visuals to match it. But that did take us on this journey then of exploring what artificial intelligence could do within the media sphere. And so I very quickly after that came out became known for being a pioneer of AI, to the point that I then started writing policy guidelines for most of the media organizations, PACT and Equity, and feeding back into the Writers Guild of America and Writers Guild of Great Britain and SAG-AFTRA deals and so on, to the point that we were then known for being ethical in our approach. And that I'm going to run forward by 2 or 3 years here. That is then what attracted Mike Parkinson Jr. He doesn't like being called Mike Parkinson Jr., so I'm going to do it more frequently now that I know that. So Mike Parkinson Jr. got in touch to say, could we look at creating a show that used AI, or an AI version of his father, to explore the archive that they had? And when we looked into that, we realized that there probably wasn't going to be the financial investment available from commissioners at that time to facilitate that. because Sir Michael, hadn't been on our screens for a while, and unfortunately, no matter how much of a national treasure somebody is, you still need to have an immediate sort of relevance in order for a commissioner to give you some money to make something. And so we explored other options, and one of the options we discussed in that early conversation was about we probably could get money to build this voice and the software around it if we were doing. And this really was an off the cuff moment of just saying, look, if he was doing live interviews again, yes, we'd probably get the money for it. But what would be the point in doing that? And that was where that idea was born, even if that wasn't where the idea of the podcast Virtually Parkinson actually was generated. That Virtually Parkinson was born off an idea that came considerably later after that initial slightly jokey kind of suggestion.
Is the podcast idea based, I'm guessing, on Jamie's own experience of doing the Jerry Anderson podcast, and then they've got these other offshoot podcasts that they've been doing with Anderson Entertainment?
No. I mean, Jamie having an awareness of how podcasts work within the digital space is, of course, advantageous to any production if you have somebody who has experience of doing that. But no, the idea of the podcast was actually born out of this slightly weird interaction that I had on another project, which is that I was approached to make an AI model of a TV commissioner in order to pitch an idea into a channel. And so the TV format that we had made involved some AI interactions around an AI model that you could have an unscripted conversation with in order to explore something. And we had this idea that wouldn't it be interesting that rather than us pitching the idea to the commissioner in the room, wouldn't it be interesting if we had already had a conversation, had already pitched this idea to an AI version of that TV commissioner, and then we played that video out to the commissioner live in the room. So it was a little bit meta. And so I built an AI model of the TV commissioner, and then I pitched the show that we were making to this AI TV commissioner in order to explore how that was going to go. And whilst I was doing it, I realized that it was an utterly terrifying experience and not like any other conversation I'd had before. And at that point, I went back to Mike with Jamie on the call, because obviously Jamie's the co-founder of the production company that I run. And I said, look, actually, there is validity to this experience because we can explore now a whole new style of discussion. Because when you're talking to an AI, you're not getting any of the affirmations, either audio or visual, that you would do in any normal conversation. And the AI tends to probe in a way that a human wouldn't, because humans tend to ask they tend to ask the questions based on a personal agenda, and they tend to respond to those visual cues. So if I knew that somebody I was interviewing felt uncomfortable about something, depending on the style of interview, either I would probe further into that or I would lean away from it. And the AI has no emotional context, so it can't tell whether somebody's feeling uncomfortable or not. It will just keep going until you go, oh God, look, I've got nothing else to say on this. This isn't where so it gave me a very, very different experience. And so that is why we opened the door to this idea of doing an AI podcast. And then once we'd opened the door to that, we explored it further. What we said was, actually, we need to be transparent about this. We don't want to be passing off this as being Michael Parkinson. That doesn't align with any of the ethical values that we've been doing, or in fact with any of the legislative conversations I've been having with the government's select committees, where I now offer advice. And so we said, if we believe this is truly transparent and open, so we lean into the fact that everybody knows it's an AI, and we make the AI part of an iterative process. So at the end of the interviews, we then deconstruct the interview and say what was good, what was bad, what was ugly, and most importantly, what can we improve on for the next one? then that becomes part of the format, and that becomes an interesting point in and of itself, outside of the actual interview and chat show element of the show. And that's how it came about.
You've brought in something I was going to come to later, but because you've introduced it, I'm going to go there now. Okay.
Yeah, of course.
So that is one of the aspects that I love the most about it, is the fact that in the very first episode, and then in the second one, you do exactly the same. But we'll go to the experience of listening to the first episode of it. And I listened to it and I thought the interview was interesting, and I was taking notes. I'll be honest. I've done it with both of the two episodes that have come out so far. Yep. I've taken extensive notes of both because I was just fascinated with the whole idea of it. So there was the interview, and then there was the surprise element that then after the half-an-hour interview that you had with Jason, suddenly you've got this discussion between the three of you, between yourself, Ben, and Mike, that discusses how you think that the interview went, how the AI virtual Parky was, and how you think you could move along and develop it and adapt the software accordingly to make it more flowing and feel more, closer to the real Parky in essence. And that's the interesting bit, is that bit at the end. To me personally, as a creative, that was just so fascinating.
Yeah, I think that, but I think that is exactly the point, is the fact that this is a podcast that sort of has to work on two sides. One is that it attracts that what's behind the curtain. Yeah. It's kind of revealing the Wizard of Oz. Out front, you've got AI Parky presenting this podcast, and we all know it's AI Parky. And then the other side is we lift up the curtain, we go, there's no wizard here. It's just three idiots in charge of a computer, and we are finding our way through it. And okay, yes, we have experience of AI, potentially more than most, but certainly we're not the best people in the world for this. We are going on a creative journey, and we think that other people are going to be interested in what that journey is as well, because we're not overly technical. I don't think. I think we're dealing with all of this in a very human way, and we're teaching ourselves the process along the way. So you go on the journey with us, and it's very interesting that other people are able to talk so openly about what works and what doesn't. I actively encourage. We could have edited those podcasts, those interviews, to make those conversations feel 100 times better than they actually were. We could have cut lines out. We could have made Parky say different versions of the questions that got us to the same end result. We could have done anything to make it feel much better. But the point is the fact that there is a creative choice that we have made to not do that, because we want that truthful element to it. And we could have hoodwinked an entire audience into believing that AI was much better than it was. And we decided we wouldn't do that. And I think that's a very, very important distinction to make between what people think our podcast is about and actually what it is about. And I really value all of the feedback we get on it. When we did Monty Don's interview, and I know that Monty Don obviously then spoke to The Guardian afterwards and shared his experiences of it, he gave us a lot of very valuable feedback. And ways his sort of slightly negative slant on the personal aspect of the interview really shaped the conversation about what we then did after that. And Monty's episode doesn't come out for another 2 weeks. Yep. But I can tell you the journey that we've been on rebuilding the model from where we were with Jason Derulo's interview to even where we are at the end of Chris McCausland's interview, through to where we will be ahead of the next interview we do, which is going to be on the 29th of January, is when our next interview is. That leap is massive. And it's all based on feedback. So when I read the comments in the YouTube videos and people saying, oh, it's not human, it's not this, actually, there are lines that people put in there where we go, that's a really good point. It doesn't do that. So I wonder if we can do this. And we're always thinking about how we can do that. And there are shortcomings that AI has, but actually that just means that there are creative applications for those shortcomings. And actually, sometimes the thing you have to lean into, rather than making a negative, you have to turn into that negative and go, actually, can we actually position this as a positive? Can we do something because it's rubbish at this? Does that actually mean we make it something that we lean into and make a positive part of the conversation? And frequently that is possible.
Yeah, it's like you've said it in both episodes so far that have come out. It's been mentioned. Was it? I'm trying to think who it was that mentioned the fact that because of the amount of time it takes for the AI to assess what's being said, in both cases so far, with Jason in the first episode and then with Chris in the second episode, because of that waiting time, they've come out with more. They've gone into more depth essentially, and you've got more from them than you would have done in a normal interview. They filled in that space by giving more information essentially.
Yes, that's right. I mean, it's the same that happens with, and you're quite right. I do mention it on both podcasts because so one of the technical limitations, and this speaks exactly to the point I was just making. One of the technical limitations that we found in testing was that sometimes AI Parky would suddenly just jump in on a guest's answers, and we had no idea why it does it, and we still don't. We're still working through this bloody problem that every so often AI Parky will just intersect an answer, and it drives us mad. But in order to fix that, what we did is we put in a 3-second delay of clear silence. So we told the model that a guest will have finished speaking once there has been silence for 3 seconds, and at that 3-second point, you can then start responding. And what works with that is the fact that the guest knows that they're not going to be interrupted. And 3 seconds is just long enough for them to think of the next thing to say. And so, as with any good journalist, and I'm not necessarily suggesting that AI Parky is a good journalist, but the thing with good journalists is the fact that they leave pauses for you to answer. And if it's ultimately what happens in that space is that the interviewee or the guest will give that piece of information that ultimately hangs them. It's the piece of information that they didn't think they were going to give out. And so you naturally, as a guest, you fill the silence, you keep going. For instance, I'm aware that I'm doing it now. You're not interjecting. There was a moment a second ago where the video stream on this Zoom call, it failed and you froze. And I suddenly realized that I needed to keep talking until your video feed caught up again in case there was something wrong. So I padded and I kept talking. And therefore I gave you more information that I didn't necessarily expect to give. I used words and language I perhaps didn't anticipate giving. And that is exactly what happens in Parky. And we found it with Chris. There's a really interesting point in Chris's interview where Parky asks, are there any anecdotes or moments in your life where you found humor from your childhood that might have shaped your course into comedy? And Chris's answer was, no, there are no anecdotes. And a human interviewer at that point would have gone, oh, okay, there's no, this line of questioning is dead. I'll interject, I'll pick it up. But Parky obviously doesn't do this, or AI Parky doesn't do this. Instead, there is a silence, and actually Chris then fills it with a really funny, lovely anecdote about his nan or his mum pouring, Coke all over her chips rather than vinegar, because her nan had the same degenerative problem that Chris does. And so suddenly you get this lovely moment where you're invited into Chris's world that you would not have got from a human interviewer. So this speaks to this idea that actually we uncover more about the guest than perhaps a human interviewer would, because they give stuff away they wouldn't normally. With Jason Derulo very graciously talks about his father. Now he doesn't talk about his father in other human interviews because he doesn't feel safe giving that information to somebody else. There's a judgmental, it opens a doorway. But with an AI host, there's no agenda from our AI host. AI Parky will pick up. It does listen. It listens intently, but AI Parky will pick up on certain elements of what a guest has said and tie it into the research notes that we've given it, and we'll take it on a journey. But the guest knows that there is no agenda there. It is just an AI forming data points and asking interesting questions and making the guest think about what they're talking about. And so it's a completely different process, and it ends up in a very, very interesting place that gets answers that you wouldn't get from human interviewers.
Yeah, and also because I mean the first two as well, you've got a case where both of them are used to, because they are celebrities, they are more used to these things, so they would know instinctively to do that, to fill in this space, because as being television people or such, they would, or people who are on the television, they would do that anyway, probably naturally.
Yeah, I mean, there gets to a point when you've done enough of these interviews and appeared on things that you do know exactly how to behave. I mean, there are people. I work in unscripted television mostly, and that means that I end up finding working with members of the public or contributors who ultimately are not TV savvy. They're not ready to be interviewed, so they give one word short answers. With people who've been around the media for a long time, there is a reason why they're introduced into, it's a reason why they're successful, is because they're good at dealing with media and speaking, and so that makes them great guests.
Yeah. So you were putting this together. I mean, so we've already touched on the difficulties with working with an AI interviewer in essence, which is that, I mean, like I said, I mean that's interesting that you're always constantly looking at how you can better the actual AI Parky. So when you were doing that, what the technical team then? Because you've obviously got people who are helping with the creativity of the software.
Yeah, so Deep Fusion Films, we hired a head of creative AI. We hired them, an old friend of mine called Christian Darkin, and I hired him, oh, I don't know, October time, I guess. And we set up on challenge then of, okay, how do we do this? How do we create the AI brain of Michael Parkinson, and make sure that it can it can talk with his voice and can have enough information there to, we can feed in the research notes and have an intelligent conversation. How do we do that? Because no software exists that allows you to do any of all those things combined. So yes, we had to write our own software, which is called Squawk. And Squawk is the software that drives the interview. And since developing that, we've actually discovered that it has a whole host of other very, very useful purposes as well. But yes, there's a team behind this. This isn't something that we're doing as a one-man band.
Yep, but each time that you do the episode, you'll come out with new things. So anyway, going to my own notes, you picked up on two things immediately between the three of you, things that I'd noticed in the first interview, which was, first of all, in the introduction, it was abrupt in a sense. It was like the introduction of Jason and then straight to the question without any sort of empathy or humanity from Parky in a sense. And
Yeah.
that was sort of like cleaned up for the second episode, although it's still going straight from the introduction into the question. And then it was also picked up later on with the fact that Jason surprised everybody and asked Parky a direct question, and then
Yes.
Parky went straight past that and straight to asking another question because he wasn't programmed for that sort of interaction per se. And then at the end of the episode, you'd both picked up on it. You'd all three of you picked up on this and
Yeah.
thought, how can we correct this? So what did happen then? What happened then to correct that and make it more better next time?
So pretty much what happens is we write notes about what are the things that we want to improve on. You know, the major one was actually the fact that Parky couldn't answer any questions. It wasn't that Parky couldn't answer any questions about Parky. It turned out that actually you couldn't ask Parky any questions at all. which was just an oversight from our side. We never saw that it needed to do it, so therefore we didn't write it in. But of course, actually, in hindsight, of course it needed to do it. So what happens there is I go away and rewrite the model. And that is me sat at the very laptop that you find me on today. And so then I do some tests to make sure that I haven't broken it, and then we go away. I suppose I didn't really think too much about the notion that it goes from the introduction straight into the question without much need of a recourse, or the guest warming up, if you like.
Yeah.
And so I didn't spend too much time on that. However, it has become more apparent the more that we do that actually some more warming is necessary. And so, yeah, funnily enough, I still don't think I've actually properly fixed that. And so you raise a good point. I probably need to spend a little bit more time on that, because that actually getting it to be subtle is something that is very tricky.
Yeah.
Getting the AI to engage in subtle conversation rather than direct questioning is a tricky thing, and has taken quite a while to get right. And I'm still not saying we got it right now, because I mean, for all the tests we do, in order to, I mean, goodness, I mean, the interviews are half an hour long. So every time I run a test, I can't have a half-hour conversation with the AI, because frankly, it drives you mad after a while. But you can sort of circumvent some of it, and you test it on certain phrases or certain times. So the only time we really do get to test it in earnest is during a record. And so we learn a lot more every time we do an iteration. And sometimes we make things worse, and sometimes we make things better. But that is part of the process. That's why we leave it as warts and all. That's why we leave the interviews completely undoctored. And so, yeah, it is just a case of me trying to rewrite and use different language and pull in more data that shows the AI how to behave. And yeah, we haven't managed to get that right in the episodes that you've seen so far. But every episode we bring a new update, and every episode what's funny is we tend to fix one problem and then create another. So yeah, it's fun. You can almost play a game of what have we fixed and what have we broken in the process. It's quite fun.
This next one, it goes to another subject that you brought up in essence at the end of the second episode, where you were saying about something about, was it Mike or was it yourself who said something about the killer question?
Yes.
So how have you gone with the killer question? I mean, really, the killer question is, to put it in other terms, is it's the sound bite that you're after, is sent in a lot of ways in an interview. So
Well,
how are you going with that?
the problem with the killer question is that implies there's an agenda.
Yeah.
And so you're trying to get something out of the guest. And we didn't want to give AI Parky an agenda. And then because there's a thing where we say, actually, how close to Parky are we actually trying to create this AI? And was Parkinson particularly agenda specific? How was he trying to get something out of the guest all the time? And I don't think he necessarily was. I think he had an area where he wanted to explore, but I don't think Parky ever had a killer question per se.
Yeah.
I think that's something that maybe has come in more frequently. So maybe we are harping back to a time of a different type of chat show, even accidentally. Maybe we are. And so we were a bit mindful about putting too much of an agenda in there. So I've pushed back on the need for a killer question.
Yeah.
However, we're now 4 podcasts in terms of recording, only 2 in terms of release, and I think maybe, having now experienced 4, maybe we do need for AI Parky to create its own agenda, which is in keeping of the style of a Michael Parkinson interview. And so I have now written a couple of lines in there that are quite meticulously worded to make sure that there is slightly more structure. Not that there is a killer question, just that we are moving in a direction and that there is more light and shade. So I think trying to get to that point where, not that there is a hidden agenda, just that the interview is moving in a direction, and AI Parky has decided that it wants to explore certain key themes, and it is directing and building towards those key themes, and asking questions that are linked to those, rather than leaving it completely open and based on. I mean, we feed in around about 15 pages worth of research notes, and AI Parky can pick up on any one of those. Whereas now, actually, I think we're saying pick 3 key themes and build towards these 3 key themes, and probe around those, rather than be completely open and be led by the guest and have these research notes as backup and as information. So I think we're trying a different technique. And from the tests I've done so far, whilst I haven't done a half-an-hour interview, it has changed the way the interview process works. So I'm intrigued to see where that goes.
And so editing as well, is it edited to get rid of those 3-second gaps? And is that all the editing that's going on?
Yes, we are only removing the 3-second gaps, and the only reason we're doing that is because it would seem like we were doing the AI a disservice if we were to include them, because the inclusion of a 3-second gap is because of a technical limitation that we have. We are struggling to understand why it's doing it, so therefore including it would be a disservice to the AI. It's not the AI that needs it, it's us that need it, because we can't build software in the right way for some reason. So we take those out. But apart from that, that is it. Every mistake, every glitch, it's in there.
Yeah, which is great, because then like I said, it gives the possibility then for the post-interview chat between the 3 of you to pick up on those glitches. Like I said, so the format of the show, interview, then behind the scenes, we've already touched on that as well. So where do you see the future going then with the virtual Parkinson?
Virtually Parkinson has a very interesting future.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of requests to explore this further in different mediums. And none of these are in a human replacement kind of way. It's not that. This is all about exploring what the technology can do. And Mike Parkinson Jr. Has been very gracious in the way that he has allowed his father and his father's voice and his father's legacy to be part of this conversation. And the reason that Mike has stated that he wants this to be part of, wants his father to be part of the conversation, is actually because when Sir Michael was doing his chat show, he wanted to be surrounded by new talent and exploring new ways of working and making sure that they were at the cutting edge of either people or trends or what have you, and then underpinned by authentic conversation. And so those things align with Mike on this, is that whilst none of us are saying that what we have is Michael Parkinson, what we do have is the values of exploration and working with new talent and new opportunities and exploring. Let's not forget, when Sir Michael started his chat show, it was completely different. Nobody else was doing a conversational chat show. And it has spawned a whole, what are we talking, 3 decades worth of chat show that is Terry Wogan, Graham Norton, Jonathan Ross. But at the start, what he was doing was completely new, and it was an exploration. And that is all we're doing here, is exploring a new way. And it's great that Sir Michael's legacy is being heralded as being almost now the ultimate human interviewer, and his clips are now being watched and shared by literally hundreds of thousands, millions of people are now seeing his clips as part of the Virtual Parkinson project. What we did is we made sure that we populated YouTube with clips from his back catalogue so that people could appreciate the sheer brilliance of the man. And there have been 92 million views of his authentic human clips that have been watched since the Michael Parkinson channel was launched back in December. 92 million views. That's how much Michael Parkinson and his legacy is being appreciated. And some of that is down to the fact that this conversation around what it means to be human is now there. And by exploring this new way of having a conversation, we are also very greatly appreciative of the work and the legacy of the great man himself. And so that we're combining that conversation all the time, which is about championing human creatives. Mike is championing Jamie and I and Deep Fusion Films by allowing us to explore this new way of communication. And at the same time, we are championing the great legacy of work that Sir Michael did in the first place. Even though a lot of people think that we're just desecrating the great man's name, and I think we're really not. We're being so transparent about everything, and the conversation is not about trying to recreate Michael Parkinson. It's about understanding where we are within the communication world now that AI is part of our lives, and what does it mean to be human. And I think that really being human is ultimately shown by what Michael Parkinson achieved during his chat shows. They had humor, they had warmth. And doesn't that say something now, is that every time we put a podcast out now, somebody wants us to, or so it's not that they want us to create the AI to be more like Michael Parkinson, it's that they are recognizing that what we have currently isn't as great as what Michael Parkinson was able to put out. And that is the journey we're going on, is that we are using Michael Parkinson as the marker for what it was to be human and great at your job. And we are so deeply honored to be able to work with Parkinson Productions in continuing that legacy.
Yep. And the reason for that, I mean, I'll just say in passing that the reason for that is because there was always this thing when you watched Michael's shows, there was a trust that you had that you were going to put on one of his shows and you would get a quality, like I said, it's a conversation as opposed to beforehand where it was just basically, we need the facts, ask the questions, get the answers. And that's basically what chat shows were before then. It was just question and answer, and there wasn't the chat. And there was the humanity that was innate within Michael that always came out in his conversations all of the time and brought out these fascinating stories from these people that you never thought you'd get that sort of information from, like the Muhammad Ali's and all these people that we used.
And that's absolutely right. And that is what we're extending in exactly the same way, is that through this new method of AI conversation that cannot interrupt, we're giving the power back to the interviewee for them to be able to explore. So again, you're finding out information that you didn't know you were going to find out. And it's an exploration into their character that you just don't get from human interviewers these days.
And that's interesting as well, thinking about it, that Michael was able to get those sort of stories from the interviewees, the guests, and from another completely different, for another reason completely different, Virtual Parky is doing the same thing and getting these stories from these celebrities, but it's because of the glitch that he's doing it. So there's something strangely similar to the two of them. They're getting those same stories from these celebrities, these people.
Absolutely. So this is exactly about leaning into the negatives. Let's acknowledge the things it can't do, and let's see if we can turn that into a positive. And there was with the Chris McCausland one that came out yesterday, there was a great tweet that went out, and it got an awful lot of traction, where somebody said, "I've never heard Chris McCausland speak so openly before."
Yeah.
And I thought that's exactly it. It's because there isn't an interviewer ready to jump down his throat to make the interview about them rather than about the interviewee. And it's wonderful to see that people are actually getting it, and they're seeing a new side to people that's being given to them by this new form of interview. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And Chris as well, he lent into it so well because, like you said in the chat afterwards, you'd spoken with Chris, and Chris was saying So how do I treat this? Do I treat him as an AI, or do I just go in as an interview? And you were saying that you'd said that Chris, technically, he just went for it and went to see, just saw where the AI character of Parky would go. And because of Chris's own interest in computers and technology, it made him more open to doing that as well, because he was fascinated in seeing for himself where that would go.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, so as with everything, you can, if you want to, you can go into that process and go, it's just an AI. I don't have to take it seriously. Or you can lean into it and you can say, I'm here for an honest, authentic experience, and I'm going to be honest and authentic with it because the people behind this podcast are honest and authentic. And they want to learn what's coming out of it. So you can go into that and you can railroad it and break it if you want to. But that doesn't really take us anywhere. It doesn't extend. We can all be cynical. We can all find where the faults are, but actually, you're not gaining anything new from the experience by being closed-minded and being able to point out the faults. It's the same as grammar Nazis, isn't it? We all know that people can't spell sometimes, but taking the upper hand is not by correcting the spelling. It's by trying to understand what it is that they're trying to talk about in the first place. And that's what's happening here, is that you can either take it apart and you can say, yeah, this didn't work, and oh God, it lasted 3 seconds before it answered me another question. Or you can go, actually, what does it do? What does this whole experience do? What does it teach us? And where is it going? What are the possibilities within that? I mean, we're looking now at future series of it and future iterations and where can we bring it? And one of the conversations we had in a production meeting the other day was about, I wonder if two things. One is, can we introduce emotional recognition? By which, can I put a camera in the room and feed that back through the AI so that the AI knows whether or not the guest is laughing, whether they are happy, whether they're sad, whether they're crying, what have you? Can I get so that there's emotional context in there with AI Parky's questions? And secondly, can I create an avatar that can, whilst it may not be able to interrupt, it can listen to the words as they come in, and can it give visual feedback? So can it nod as they're talking? Can it shake their head? Can it laugh? Can it smile? And would that enhance that human feedback that people have been looking for? And so these are the things we're looking at. Are they? What does that do? Because it's all under the guise of what is it to be human and what is it to interact with an AI? Because it will all be AI driven and it will be all authentic. And I said to somebody the other day, I said, this is where we're heading. They said, oh God, how long are you talking? Is that going to be like series 3 or something where you introduce that? I was like, oh no, there's stuff we're working on now that could be ready in 3 or 4 weeks that could get us to that point. And so that's the trajectory we're on. It's not that we're looking far into the future. We're saying, okay, there are tools out there that sort of do this, but can we retool it? Can we rebuild software that allows us to bring that in to that user experience now? And what does that do? And I think we're in a fast evolving landscape at the moment, and we're very excited to keep testing and exploring where AI human interaction goes. And it's very exciting.
It's there. It continues in the same realm as other socially conscious programming, where it looks at something that is of its time, which is now. It's something that is here now. It's topical, and it's saying basically, where are we, and where are we going to, and also what can it do, and where should we go with it? It's asking all these moral questions.
And it is. And at some point, we will run out of those questions to ask because we will have answered 95% of it and the iterations won't go anywhere. And then we need to look at, why are we doing this? Is this still a valuable experience for everybody involved? And it may well be that we get somewhere down the line and go, we're not learning anything new anymore. We're not able to iterate. We're not able to develop anymore. But we're certainly not at that point now. So yeah, I'm very, very interested to have this sort of socially conscious AI experiment running in the background all the time. That means that we get to play in a very interesting sandpit.
So, what advice moving forward into the future? What advice would you give to developers of this technology, of AI technology, and also not quite the same, but also to other people going in the world of podcasting?
I mean, advice to AI software developers is to respect human copyright, seek for informed consent wherever you are working with human creatives on any level. Full transparency is very important. You need to build software that is trustworthy, that people can have confidence in when they're using, and don't build your software on data which is not licensed. Those are my pillars for AI software builders. But please do keep building, because AI and machine learning can take us in some very, very interesting directions. And those safeguards of safeguarding humans and human creatives do not stop technological advancements and interesting areas of development, but they do provide safeguards for industry. And in terms of advice for podcasters, we have all used tools to advance creative output over the years. They have not been, tools are not here to be limiting factors. They are here for furthering development and to provide new experiences. So don't be afraid of leaning into them. AI is not coming for your job. There are 15 people involved in making the AI virtually Parkinson podcast. AI is a tool to be used and not something to decimate an industry. If used correctly and responsibly, it can enhance and create new things, but there has to be purpose for what you're trying to do. And if you can't find the purpose, then the chances are you shouldn't be doing it.
I might be putting you on the spot with this one. I don't know. I want to first of all thank yourself, Jamie and Mike, for this. But also, if you can remember all 15 of them and name them, I'd like to thank those people that are available, that are working in the team as well.
Okay, we've got, I'm going to try and remember as I sit around the room, Jamie, Mike, myself, Bryony, who's the researcher, Nikki, you have the Fitzrovia Post team, which is Johnny, Kieran, oh crumbs, I want to say Matt. Then you have, who works for us as a production assistant, where are we at now? We're at 8 or 9. And then we have Nikki. We have Caitlin, who is at Night Train Digital Commissioners. Caitlin, Lara, Kerem, who looks after the digital channels. Then you have Stephen, who does the edit. Where are we at? How many is that?
I think that's about, is that 12 or is that 13?
Could be 12 or 13. Then we have marketing, Sophie. So let's say that's 13 or 14. Oh God, there's going to be somebody else really old. Oh, Christian, who built the software.
Yep.
So it's either 14 or 15. So let's stop at 15 or 14. I will have missed somebody who Tendai, who does the accounts. There we go. There's our 15.
Yep, that's the 15. All right. Thank you very much to everybody. Because
and Natalie Jupp, who's our talent booker.
Natalie Job. I've spoken with Natalie before for someone else. So, and another reason why I brought why I said mentioning all these people is because of a subject that I had, funnily enough, on the train coming home this morning. I had the conversation with a group of us about this. And we were talking about the question of, well, it's an AI person doing the interview. And then we were all saying, yeah, but you've got this AI Parky doing the interview. But all these people have got this job that are creating this in to be honest. So you've got to accept that it's not that, it's these people who've got all these jobs.
Absolutely. They're the ones that are creating it. And it's not, AI is not autonomous.
No.
AI does not stand for autonomous intelligence. It stands for artificial, but you need somebody behind it. You need a human behind it driving it, which is why AI is a tool to be used and not something that will take your job.
Yeah, true. It makes the job a lot quicker, for sure.
Yeah,
AI a lot of the time.
But then that speaks to the whole podcast industry, doesn't it? I mean, how much money is there in podcasting? I mean, certainly not enough that I could pay my mortgage on it. The whole purpose of the podcast is the fact that it can be made cheaply. And so therefore, if you've got some tools that can make things even cheaper, then actually you can make more of them and you can hopefully make some money at it. So none of us are, you imagine that a podcast budget is going to be paying for 15 people's mortgages? I think not.
No, absolutely. So, do you actually listen to podcasts yourself, and what do you listen to?
I have to say, I do listen to podcasts. So I enjoy The Rest Is Politics, and I enjoy The Rest Is Entertainment. I listen to, and I complete. Oh, it's gone out. The name always goes out of my head. So excuse me whilst I just go through my Spotify account to find where it is. There's no such thing as a fish.
Yes.
That, and I listen to the news agents, and it's not the one I was thinking of. Why can't I find it? It's the one with it's the one with, oh my God, why am I? It's not called Shameless. It's called
Smartless.
Smartless. That's it. And I listen to Smartless. There we go. They're my go-tos, if you like.
Yeah. I like the spin-off as well that Sean Hayes is doing, the Clueless as well, where it's like a quiz show. That's fun.
Okay. Yeah, no, I've not seen that one.
And just hearing Sean getting flummoxed is hilariously funny.
Yes, he is very funny.
So where can people find you and get hold of you, Ben?
People can find me on most social media channels, normally under the handle of Benjamin_Field. That's often best, but I tend to not really use Twitter or X anymore. I don't use Facebook, so Instagram and LinkedIn are probably the best places. But yeah, it's always Benjamin Field rather than Ben. I don't really know why. It just always has been.
Yep, and Virtually Parkinson is available on anywhere you can stream podcast. There's also a really fascinating, if you go to YouTube, there's an account for it as well, where you can watch the actual interview taking place and the interview guest reactions, and that's interesting as well to see their natural reactions physically to when they're being asked questions.
So that can be found on the Michael Parkinson channel. That's what that's called, at Michael Parkinson channel on YouTube. So that has all of the old archive, and it also has all of the new podcasts, and all the producer chats are there as well.
Okay. You can find Pods Like Us on any streaming platform as well. We are on all social media: Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, Blue Sky, and all these other places. And we have a Patreon page as well if you want to go there, where we've got extra bonus footage, and we're available through podslikeus@gmail.com. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening, and hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us. Thank you.